loyal to the Union, but everyone goes with true because that's what it looks like it says, but it really means loyal, and purists really frown on you when you say true to the Union rather than loyal to the Union. It's just one of those things that have developed over the years. Yesterday we had a very nice event yesterday. There were 3 of us and the two reporters from Kerrville, and they were very open-minded, which we don't always get with reporters, and it was very nice for them to be that way. And everybody spoke and said their piece. And so I would like for everybody to climb the fence, and we're going to go around and read the names off the monument.
There's a little spot right here that you can come over. There's a hook. There you go.
Yes. A young woman remade the large wreath covered by the black shawl. She remade it from about 5 Christmas wreaths that had hung up there and had weathered. So this is a remade, recycled wreath that we used this morning for her. She can't come, I'm sorry to say. Oh. Yesterday before we got here, someone had come and very carefully laid the broken branches of oak leaves here underneath the wreath and onto the grave. This is where the people who were killed at the Nueces and every place else ended up burying. We were just talking about a while ago, the skulls are all there. The depth of the bone, we're not sure. By depth, I mean how many of the bones, we're not sure, because that they did not get. They only ever counted the skulls. All right, so let's come to this side. And John, if you'll start off, and everybody just take a turn and read a name, and then we'll move on. This one says killed and murdered, and this was at the actual battle itself. This is not what people are upset about. If men are going to go and fight, men are going to get killed. This is not what they were upset about, being killed in battle, okay? So, John?
W. Burner.
Next, sir?
T. Bruckish.
Very good.
C. Bach.
H. Flick.
F. Tays.
A. Luckenbach.
L. Rubin.
A. Rubson? Yeah, I guess so.
H. Steeler.
Steeler, I'll tell you a story about Henry Steeler in a little bit. All right, let's come around here. Now, these are the ones that were killed. I'm going to draw. Those were the ones that were killed afterwards. These are people who were killed at the site. And we have a list of names over which no one has argued, because the survivors who went back and counted the bodies and took the names, this is their list. So, Richard, you want to start with the first name,
Sure.
please?
L. Bauer.
F. Burns.
Good,
Yes.
very good.
E. Bezeler.
L. Burner.
A. Bruns.
H. Degner.
H. Degner.
P. Diaz.
F. Vodder. A. Schreiner. It's already done.
Okay.
Yeah.
P. Diaz.
No, I got him.
Yeah, it's A. Schreiner.
A. Schreiner. Oh,
There you go. It's okay.
J. G. Kallenberg.
M. Marquardt.
C.
Oh,
Schaefer.
H.
L. Shearholz.
H. Steves.
W. Tosman.
Good.
M. Werrick.
H. Wyverhausen.
Good.
A. Vater.
Very good. Let's go to the next side.
Why was the Shriner added? It looks like it was added later.
Nope, it was all done
Nope,
at the
that
same
was all
time.
done at the same time.
It just doesn't quite fit. Yeah, but it's kind of hand done too. So.
And nearly everybody had someone come and carve it, and it meant something to them. Because you can obviously look at it and tell it's not the same stonemason who did them. So nearly everybody's name was put on there by someone. Like, for instance, Pablo Diaz's name, we're pretty sure that Moisebach sent somebody down because he had purchased Pablo Diaz from the Comanches when they were coming up from Mexico on one of their cattle and children raids, and he bought him for 50 pounds of salt. And so Pablo Diaz was 7 years old, and he hopped off the back of his horse and he lived with John Moisebach till he was about 22 years old. They taught him to cook, they taught him to be a horseshoer and to take care of horses. And how he got mixed up in the Loyal League, we will never know yet. Maybe someday, but anyway, he was purchased for 50, and he went with them. That was amazing. Fredericksburg lost more people than anybody. Okay, you can start here down to end. You.
J. Elster.
V. Holman.
E. Felsing.
M. Weiss.
H. Herman.
F. Weiss.
Peter Bonnet.
Did we get Holman?
I did.
V. Holman? Okay, very good.
Yeah.
All right.
Kind of went a different way.
And then let's come around to the front again.
I don't quit many times in the same direction.
A couple of the things, hey Chuck Jones, welcome. A couple of things I'd like to say, and that is, today we call this organization the Union Loyal League. They did not call themselves that, they called themselves the organization. The couple of letters that we have actually found from the actual people call it the organization. The man who called it the Union Loyal League was the contract surgeon from Bracketville who worked for the Confederates. His name was Edmund Downs. And he was the one, I read this letter he wrote to the guy in San Antonio, and he said, Colonel Gray, those Loyal League people over here in the Frio River giving us hell, same as they gave us over in the Comfort area. You got to send more troops over here. So that's the earliest we can, and that was about 64. And that's the earliest that we have found any reference to Loyal League. These people call it the organization. Number 2, they did not call themselves free thinkers. They were, but they didn't call themselves, and they still don't. I only know one person today who calls themselves a free thinker. They don't like labels, okay? And they surely don't like you telling them that they're a free thinker, because it's none of your damn business, okay? How they think or what they think. The third thing is, they are not conscientious objectors. I have not had a chance to really go and look through the paper. Well, that's not the truth. I've looked through the papers. They don't really have those words at that time. It wasn't a matter of conscience. It wasn't a matter of abolishing slavery. It was a matter of me saying to you, we need your hay for our horses and we need it yesterday, and you need to take it to Fredericksburg. And that's probably what they did. But they did take the oath of allegiance to keep their children from being threatened, and their wives from being threatened, and their fences from being torn down, and their cattle slaughtered, or whatever livestock they had slaughtered. So, not conscientious objectors, weren't interested in the subject of slavery. This is only comfort now that I'm talking about. It's only these people in the organization. The rest of them, there were a lot of Christians involved, and they may involved in this area, but they weren't organization members, and they may truly have been interested in slavery, the abolition of slavery, but I haven't read a letter from them yet, or seen a journal that said it just yet. So I don't want you to think, one of the guys who survived, Mr. Dabler, he was 16 years old. He has a relative living down in the valley somewhere who swears that he was a conscientious objector. So I finally said to him, what are you talking about? I said, this sounds like an agenda. And he said, well, I didn't want to go to Vietnam, so I went to Canada. And I just wanted to make sure I had a conscientious objector earlier in my history. So I said, fine, just don't put that in any of your writings, because that, at this point in time, really isn't the truth. As soon as you show me a journal that Richard Dabler kept and called himself whatever, we can go with it. So many times what I say sounds like opinion, but if you think it is, please say, Ann, stop. Are you sure about that? Are you sure about that sentence you just said? And I can either say, I don't care what you think, or yes, this is what it was, and this is where I read it, okay? Anybody got a question?
I was going to say, it sounds like this group, what we know of them, has a certain identity. There may be other identities in the area that they may have overlapped with, but we have no documentary evidence that says this group or any member of this group has pro-slavery, anti-slavery, pro-union.
Well, actually we do. It's from the 1854 Singer Fest in New Braunfels, because that's where everybody stood up and was counted. And unfortunately for everybody, Adolph Dewey, who was the editor of the San Antonio paper, wrote about it, and he wrote about it in English. Otherwise, they'd all still be alive today. But no, Dewey writes about it in English so that everybody knows where the Germans stand. So yeah, we do know. They had a Singer Fest. They have a shooting club. They have a singing club. They have a picnic club, they have an athletic club, and this is these like-minded people that go around. This is a picture of downtown Comfort from 1854 to the Civil War, and what they wrote was a handwritten newspaper. And in it they gave Alt-Gelb, the farmer, they gave the founder, they gave Alt-Gelb hell. They called him the snob, they called him the aristocrat, they called him the person in charge, and every time he got drunk and had to appear before the JP, they wrote about it to their mothers, because I read the letters, okay? They were so glad. Fontaine and his uncle got their noses smashed in on High Street, on 7th Street, and they had to pay the JP. He had it coming. The guy from Sisterdale wrote home to his mother in Sisterdale to tell him that. So that's how we know that. This is the man who started the organization. His name was Edward Dagner. He was from Sisterdale. He was a member of the failed revolution of 1848 in Germany. He had to get out of Germany so that he would still be alive, that he could come. He said, okay, we lost the revolution in Germany, we can go to Texas and set it straight. At the 1854 Sangerfest, the Germans who could have came together for the political side of that decided that they would secede from Texas, from just outside New Braunfels all the way to El Paso. And it'd be called the Free State of German West Texas. And once you got in there, you were free. Now, we want your children to go to school, don't care if they're brown, white, or black, but your children have to go to school because Germans are well educated, and if you're going to live in German West Texas, you got to be educated. And that's the only rule as far as we could ever find. You can find it online. It's 1854 Constitution from the Sangerfest in New Braunfels, and you can read it. It's got a great platform. No lawyers. Everything has to be open on Sundays. Yes, you can go to church, but don't talk to us about it, etc., etc., okay? All righty. Now, we would like for John Carter to give you his take on the free thinking principle.
I can only come from my own family and what was told to me and passed down to me. My family came here in 1860, and they what was told to me was that they came from turmoil within the church and turmoil within the government. They wanted to come here to be free. They saw the United States as a place where they could start clean, and they could basically just be free. And they didn't want any government nor religious overlord. And all of my life, this was sort of taught to me. I was taught, though, that the free thinkers were not necessarily atheists.
Correct.
But in fact, that it was just the fact that they didn't want you and your trouble and my trouble to mix together, because when we're together, we needed to appreciate each other. However, we're here for each other, no matter what color your skin, no matter what religion you are, what government belief you are. On a base level, we're human beings, and we should take care of each other. We don't need the government to do that.
Or the church.
Or the church. Did not either one of them, because they didn't want the influence of, as I would say, it's hard for me to read many Bibles, because when I open up the front portion, it says, this was edited by, for the purposes of. And when I get to that point, I can't go any farther. It just ilks me. It does not mean that I've not read that, but I have to get past it. I wonder, and I have a question in my mind, and I'm going to ask Ann to respond, or she doesn't have to, but all these young men, all these men who took off and left from here, can you imagine, you swore allegiance to the United States when you came into this country, you said, I'm going to wholeheartedly believe in this country, and then you're being asked very quickly, I mean, you came here in 1854, and all of a sudden you're being asked to take sides and asked to fight for a government once again. I wonder if some of those men were just wanting to get away, not really siding with anything. They just wanted freedom, and I can't imagine, as I have been told, that they were Union sympathizers, with the exception of not having uniforms on.
Correct.
And I just think how horrible it must have been to leave your family, to know that you're going into dangerous territory, and what are you really standing up for? You're standing up for freedom. You're standing up for the ability to make your own choice. Now, my own relatives, I'll give you a good example when it comes to the thought of church. I went to visit an old uncle, and he was not a direct blood uncle. However, as far as I was concerned, he was uncle, and that's where we were raised. It's kind of a hard thing to swallow when you're 30 years old and you're told by your mother, oh, he was not really your uncle. Oh no, he was my uncle. But I went to visit him on Easter Saturday, and he says he was out next to the house. He was plowing the field around the house using a mule. And the reason being was he had moved on to tractors, but he still believed that disturbing the ground around the house was not a good idea. It was almost sacrilege, so he was using the mule. And I got over there, he's walking with a mule, and I got next to him and I said, he said, for what reason are you here? I said, I'm here because I had today off, and tomorrow's Easter Sunday. I came to visit you. Well, what do you want to talk about? He kept moving with the plow. So we talked a little while, and then I finally triggered him off because I knew it was going to go that way. I said, are you going to church tomorrow? It's Easter Sunday. Whoa. He pulled the mule up, and he looks at me and he says, if Jesus wants to find me, he's going to have to come here because I got work to do. And then he took the reins, threw them over my neck. Gip! I started plowing with him. I'll skip along many years later, and I was at his funeral. And I said to his sons, I can just imagine Jesus walking next to him and him turning going, for what reason are you here?
Exactly.
But the free thinkers that I know of were people that did have some religion to some extent, and they believed in people, they believed in life, they believed in getting along. And yet at the same time, I had uncles that would go to church and sit in the car while their wives would go into the church to have the ceremony, because they weren't going in there because, as I do, I find God in all of us. I find God here, now. I find him in every little plant. I picked up a rock over there that from this point on I'm going to say that it's the end of a dinosaur bone, because that's what it looks like. And I find God in that rock. So why do I need to go into a church? Occasionally I will step into one just to see what it's like. But for me, God is amongst us all.
Questions?
How long did it take for them to get to the Nueces after they left?
10 days.
How long did it take them to get back?
Well, they went down 10 days on horseback and they walked back in under 4. Hiding and at night, they walked back under 4 days. Chuck Jones, would you like to address the free thinking or the monument or something?
Speaks for itself.
Yes, it does. I just thought you might like to say a word or two for it. Oh, Chuck Jones, shame on you.
What proportion of people left? Who stayed?
Women,
Just the women folk?
a couple of very old gentlemen,
Oh wow. Okay.
and of course every woman had a child every 2 years.
Yeah.
And
Youngest was about 16.
yes, Richard Dabler was 16. He was the youngest. Henry Steeler was the second youngest. He was 17. Henry Steeler was one of those who escaped from the battle, came up. He was found out in Kerrville, and they took him to White Oak Creek and hung him with his friends, Mr. Buckish and Mr. Burner. His mother and his sister rode there from Comfort up to White Oak Creek to get his body, and it was too deteriorated hanging in the tree to take it down. So someone took it down for them, and the sister covered it with brush and said, I'm coming back to get it at a later date. Something happened to the mother, and the Steeler family are very reticent on that fact, but the mother lost her mind. Mrs. Wilhelmina Steeler lost her mind, and she was 38 when it happened, and she lived for 39 more years, and every day of her life she felt like the Confederates were coming. She said, the Confederates are coming, the Confederates are coming. They told me they would come and get me for what I did. Well, the Steelers won't tell us what they did, and neither did the younger Wilhelmina, the sister. Her family wouldn't tell us, and I don't really blame them. Finally, Mr. Steeler, Gottlieb Steeler, freethinker whose name means God's love, went to the commissioner's court in Kerr County and said, you can read the transcript for yourself. My wife has lost her mind and she's crazy. What can I do about it? And they said, you can put her in the insane asylum, but it's going to cost you $10 cash a month. And he said, we can afford that. And they said, well, then you take him over there and we'll give you the writ that your wife is insane. How come is she insane? She doesn't do anything anymore. She doesn't feed the boys. She doesn't do the chickens. She doesn't make the meals. She doesn't get the water. She sits there and she's afraid in the barn of the Confederates. So Mr. Steeler got his, the commissioner's court were the ones who had to admit you to the, it's called the insane asylum. John, get that picture right there behind me. There you go. It's called the insane asylum, and we went and read all the records. She was treated for mania caused by the war, and this is where she was treated.
So they would have called that PTSD today.
That's exactly what they would have called it. Thank you very much. And this is the young woman, or this is the woman who, when she was young, went and got her brother's body twice and brought it home. And he's supposed to be buried on the farm next to us, but we have gone over that farm with a fine-tooth comb and we have found no depression anywhere. So I don't know if she actually got him home or not, but that is part of that story. This is how a little comfort changes. Their family, the Steelers, came in about 1856. Our family, as John said, came in 1860. We're right next to each other out on North Creek Road, okay? We share a fence. Well, both of us look like white trash with that fence, okay? You know what a white trash fence looks like, right? It's like it needs money and time and labor and people. Well, we haven't done that fence yet, and we're still neighbors today. One of the Steelers has uterine cancer. One of the Steelers has Huntington's disease, and the third Steeler is a Confederate, which I think is an incredible story for Comfort, Texas. Michael, what would you like to say about this?
I already asked my one question.
Well, that's asking, that's not saying.
That's true. I just always baffles me that on horseback it took them that long to get over there, and on foot it took them less than half the time to get back.
You know, this is the man who led them, Fritz Tegner. He's the guy who led them away. And they, all the way you see in all these interviews, the people saying, why aren't we hurrying? We're not going fast enough. And he said, we're okay. The governor gave us 30 days to get out of Texas because he gave all the traitors a chance for 30 days. Well, we have never found that order. Not in the Confederate records, in the archives, not in the governor's, not anywhere we found that order. But he thought they were. And so they stopped early every day, they hunted, they sang. We were free thinkers. They debated every night around the fire about, you know, should we when we go back to Comfort start a church? Should when we go back to Comfort secede from the Texas and set up a state where everything is done right? Because you need to know Germans are superior to everybody else because we think it through and got huge amounts of brains. And how we lost the 48 revolution, we'll never know, but we're going to do it right this time. Just nobody came back. The old men who stayed went to San Antonio and went into politics, and every survivor of the massacre, everybody who survived here, and everybody who survived, everybody's a large term, but when you start looking at the names, they gave them, Mr. Degner gave them appointed jobs. They were like, the guy who does the import and export. He made one of them the director of the insane asylum. He gave everybody a job. He made them state surveyors. Every man who survived the battle and who survived part of that like-mindedness was given a government job in Austin, and they lived happily and very well ever after. Two women lost their minds, Mrs. Steeler and Mrs. Degner. Mrs. Degner lost both her boys. It's a heartbreaking letter. He wrote, Mama baked bread for Hugo and Hilmar today. It's enough to last them for a week to get to Mexico. It made Mama very sad. It's just this like, oh, you know, because those ladies made such marvelous bread, and you know those young men were so happy. So, yeah, that was the way it was. Mike Stewart, you want to say something?
I want to say it's one of the finer organizations in town, because there is no organization.
Yes.
It's us.
Yes.
We, Ann and I, and my son, Chuck, we all have a part in the preservation of this unit, of this community. And this is part of it.
This is part part of it. All right, let's go move on to Richard. I'm sorry, were you through, Lovey?
Oh, yes.
Can I add one
Very
more?
good. Sure.
I'd like to add one more thing, if I may. Part of my reason for my belief is because all of my life I have taken care of animals that have been in need. Today, I'm well known for taking care of birds of prey, to include our national symbol, the bald eagle. And all of my life, I've been told you're wasting your time because animals don't have souls. You should be working on humans. And it really was painful. And so I searched through all these Bibles for that. And the only thing in every Bible that has never changed, it says, tend thy garden. And my mother finally ended it. She waited till I was 35. And she said, listen, we all know we have souls. What's important to know is that we have souls so that we can rise above and take care of anyone else. And if I'd like, I would. It's a very short thing. I just remembered I wanted to read it. This is from the Freethinkers think tank, because I asked a question on the web. What a wonderful piece of equipment, you know. You can just get your automatic dictionary.
Amen.
But this is from the Freethink tank, and they are atheists. However, it says, what I asked was this question. I didn't ask it to the Freethink tank. I asked it to the World Wide Web. Can a freethinker believe in God? The postdoctoral researcher who first worked with me, this woman wrote this article, said, as a new minted junior lecturer came from Moscow, a theoretical physicist trained in the excellent school of polymer physics, MGU, Tanya was a fearsomely good mathematician and wielded theoretical statistical mechanics with a distinct Russian flavor. That was scientifically useful. Two complementary approaches to a problem are always more powerful than one. We compared other notes too about our education, our very different experiences growing up in the 60s and 70s, London or Moscow. I was interested and somewhat amused when the topic of teenage rebellion came up. Schooled with a stream of materialist atheism and Soviet cultural history by day, Tanya and her breakaway 60-year-old friends would head off to the underground churches by night. Context makes a big difference. Degrees of freedom. No one can be a freethinker who demands conformity to a Bible, creed, or Messiah. That is their statement. Constraints on conclusions. True enough, a freethinker cherishes freedom in others as much as in herself, and will not make demands of conformity on the thought of others. But when the mandatory tone is removed, the foundation statement begins to look like a constraint. The a priori demand that thinking through a worldview should rule out belief in God constitutes a constraint, a mental removal of a cognitive degree of freedom. More constraints imply fewer degrees of freedom, so imposing a non-thesis constraint to thinking achieves the same as any constraint. It makes it less free, not more. The philosopher Bertrand Russell knew that freethinkers do not impose the constraints of conclusions at the outlet of their thinking. He insists that freedom of thought is a process, not an end. To the freethinker, revelation and faith are invalid, and orthodoxy is no guarantee of truth. What makes a freethinker is not his beliefs, but the way in which he holds them. If he holds them because his elders told him they were true when he was young, or if he holds them because if he did not, he would be unhappy, his thought is not free. But if he holds them because after careful thought he finds a balance of evidence in their favor, then his thought is free. However odd his conclusions may seem. This is going to end. Being a freethinker isn't something that can be achieved overnight. It is a journey of self-discovery. Carl Sagan advised us to be open-minded, but not so open-minded that our brains fall out.
Thanks, John, very much. Richard Hockamay. This is Richard Hockamay. He comes from Washington, of all places, not the Washington, the other Washington. And he wrote Comfort's first and only to date folk opera, The Blues and the Gray. He also wrote a couple of novels about the people that lived here. One is Dancing on a Golden Thread, and the second one is, the first
Cry
one
for
was
Freedom.
River of Bones,
Yep.
and then Dancing on the Golden Thread. So if you get a chance, check them out in the library and pick up a copy on Amazon. Richard, go for it.
I moved here 15 years ago this summer. It's hard to believe I've been here that long. And at that time, downtown High Street was not as, it's been gentrified a little bit and kind of brought up to date and buildings done. But I got here, didn't have much to do, so I'd walk up and down High Street and look at all these plaques. And I counted them one day, a couple of years ago, and I think there's 19 historical markers between the school right there and the end of High Street down there. It's about 1.25 miles, 18, and you probably won't find 18 historical markers on one street anywhere in this entire country. It's pretty amazing when you think of it. And so I started thinking, well, what's a free thinker? I'd never heard anything about a free thinker, and then I read about these German and this battle, and at that time we had a general store which was the oldest continually open general store in all of Texas. It was opened in 1867 and didn't stop operating until it burned to the ground in 2007. And the gentleman who was the cashier and owner of that place was a real character, and I'm privileged to have been here for at least 4 or 5 years to meet him and talk to him. And he had talk about a brain of history. He just had it down. And you know, and we talked, and I started writing stuff about it, and he goes, "Oh, this is really great. You need to go talk to a lady up on the corner. Her name is Ann. You need to go introduce yourself to Ann." So that's how Ann and I met about 14 years ago, something like that. And she sat me down and said, "All right, you got to understand. You kind of got a picture of those things, but you don't quite get it. That these sides are still as alive today as they were 150 years ago." And I went, "Oh, come on. I'm a northern kid. I'm from Seattle, Washington.
Yeah.
They could not possibly have this animosity still between Confederate. That's not even possible." She goes, "Oh, it really is. If you go that way 10 miles or that way 10 miles, you're going to figure it out." And sure enough, I was in Sisterdale, and we were out talking, and we're having a couple of drinks, and this guy said, "So are you a Union guy or a Confederate guy?" I went, "Are you kidding me? Really?"
Yeah.
Yeah, and it's true. And so, and when you look at where we are in today, it's probably hotter topic than even back then, because now we're starting to tear down Confederate monuments and put them away, change history. They're talking about changing. We can't have Austin anymore. It's got to be called something else, because Stephen F. Austin.
Nobody's really calling for that.
Yeah, and so we can't have. We have to. And so I have some friends who are just like, we're going to tear down everything, anybody, and completely disregard anybody who ever had anything to do with slavery, which means founding fathers, everybody else. Yeah. So we're going to rewrite history. We're going to change everything. We're going to tear it all down.
Nobody's really asking for that.
Oh yeah, they are. Yeah, they are. You online, you'll see it. I see it every day on Facebook.
Well, I mean, but I mean, like,
Facebook's
we're
not real.
You mean real people? Yeah.
Facebook's not real life.
Well, opinions are real life, and those opinions are out there. They're all over the place.
We
So
get calls weekly and have gotten it for about 6 or 8 months of, "Mrs. Stewart, we hear," they start out very flattering, "Mrs. Stewart, we hear you know everything about comfort." And I always say, "You darn right I do." If it's known, I know it. At any rate, they say, "Well, we're looking for some various graves." And I said, "Well, for that you go to Google. That's called Find a Grave." Well, we've used that. But didn't tell us what we wanted. I said, "Well, what did you want?" "We want to know where all the Confederates are buried." And I said, "They're buried where they're going to rest in peace." And they said, "Well, we thought you knew everything about Comfort." I said, "I do. I know everything in the world you could possibly want to know about Comfort, Texas, but I don't know where any Confederates are." And so they hang up the phone. Sometimes they get my husband and they're really sorry. And it's just, it is real. Yes, it is real.
If we don't get out of our state of apathy, it's going to happen. Will continue to happen.
Once they've torn down all of the monuments that have anything to do with slavery, slavery will not have existed, and you're doing a terrible injustice to the people who were once slaves.
That's true.
Well, what I advocate is all the monuments that say the South left because of states' rights, is that they either be corrected or an interpretive plaque put up saying the states' right that they were referring to was the right to extend slavery to other states, to extend the market, and the right to retrieve the slaves that had fled to free states. So that's the state right.
So have you convinced anybody to put that up yet?
No, that's what we're working on. That's why we have an organization.
That's what I'm working on too, and it is.
I just want things to be true. I don't want things to disappear. I'm not trying to erase anything. I just want the truth out there.
I guess we'll need you to write that down and sign it in blood for you, Eve, okay? So when you say when she was here, she was sane and wonderful. So there we go.
I've got a vein right here.
Richard?
But this monument, this monument, what have we determined? There's maybe 3 monuments to the Union in all of the Confederate States.
Mm-hmm.
That's it.
what I've read.
And
yeah.
how many Confederate monuments are there? There was hundreds, thousands.
There's 3 at the Capitol.
Yeah. So this
4.
this it's just it's a hidden treasure that very few people. I mean, there's many people that I've run across in San Antonio who have no idea this is even here. There's people that have lived in this town who don't even know this is here. They drive by her and really don't know what it's all about.
The head of the history department at Treue University, John Huddleston, had never come. He never got off his lazy button out of his ivory tower.
We sat down with him one day, which was
Richard
enlightening.
It's Richard's fault. He introduced us.
Good job.
And we invited him, and he wouldn't come.
No.
I said, well, there's a Shriner name on it. You can suck up that way. And they said, well, no, I haven't come. And he never did.
Wow.
He said, well, you all can have my auditorium to have a. And we said, why would we come in here? This is Kerrville. Y'all didn't do jack. And we're going to do it in comfort. Yeah, he was. I just couldn't believe he was that way.
That's strange. I mean, why would? Oh, well.
He was a history professor, and he also was on the local NPR station. He had a minute or a couple minutes on every single day of every day of the Civil War from the beginning to the very last day. So it was like a 4-year project.
Wow.
Every day he had and I don't know that he ever mentioned.
He never mentioned the Treue Union Monument.
Never mentioned it. It was just like skimmed over, like, no, don't need to know.
No, that's not a real thing.
Mr. Vaughn.
Never really happened.
Mr. Vaughn.
Yes,
First
ma'am.
of all, I want to say thank you for coming because you can see this is an unruly crowd. And
We're horrible.
I was tempted to call back up a few times, but I withheld and held off.
I saw you backing up when this woman approached you. Oh gosh, Mr. Vaughn's in trouble.
No.
I'd like to ask you if you would like to say something about the Civil War or the monument.
No, I mean, I agree with everything that everybody says. You know, we need to remember our history, and whether we agree with what they felt or not, it's how we got here today. And to forget about it or to tear it down, as Mr. Jones has said, is a travesty. And so, people like y'all keeping this going, I appreciate y'all's effort.
Well, thank you very much. I'll pass that along to everybody who does it because it was a good crowd. It
Yeah.
was a good, very interesting crowd yesterday. All right, the rest of you all need to all say something. You want to start with you?
Okay. I consider myself somewhat a student of history. I'm a genealogist by semi-pro, if you will, and history and family history certainly play all into that. And I was never aware of this monument. I'm certainly very aware of the monuments in Austin for the other aspects of it. My own personal take is, and I agree, that recognition of our history. We don't want to lose our history, and that's why I mentioned original documentary evidence earlier, because that's really the root of what we have.
It is.
Everything from deeds to family story, the letters, to the articles of secession that we can read, everything through all the stuff for this as well. But being able to have that, there's one thing to have public history and public monuments to events and scenarios. There's another thing to glorify bad deeds. And I think that's probably where we can probably agree more as well on groups that say tear it down versus it's our history. Either make it clear what the monument is for, it's a monument for our history, or are we glorifying an evil deed? And I'm certainly opposed to the glorifying the evil deed aspect. I'm very thrilled to find out that there are other things here that should be more promoted out in the public. And I'm very happy to see local people taking up that helm and keeping that moving forward.
Thank you for coming.
Thank you.
Young man.
Hello, my name is Anthony Strain. Actually recently out of the military, so I'm trying to, get my civilian feet wet a little bit, so to speak, and just explore what Texas has to offer, what I missed when I was deployed, and being busy with the military and everything. So it's great to be at a place like this and learn about the other side of Texan history that you don't get to hear much about.
Are you a Texan?
I am not. I am originally from Indianapolis, Indiana.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Thank you for serving.
Thank you.
Glenda?
Well, I mean, I've already said that, for me, it's about accuracy and balance and honoring the honorable. You know, when I found out about the hello church bells. When I found out about this, I was just really excited to find out that there was some balance to the monuments, and that people will say, well, everybody in Texas was a Confederate. It's just they had to be because there was no option. And to find out that there were people in Texas who felt strongly enough about it that they would pick up and move, I was just very glad to hear that.
Their wives sent them.
Yeah.
They didn't pick up and move. Their wives sent them so they'd not be alive. You read in there, he always says, why did you send me to Europe, Emma? And now you write me these letters. Why am I going to parties and dances? He said, because you sent me here. You said for me to leave comfort.
Yeah.
And they gave their wives grief about that. He really did, and he was there the whole time in Europe.
Emma gave him, I've read those letters, and boy, oh boy, did she blister him while she was here and he was in Germany. Just blistering letters. There was no ambiguity. I mean, she just let him have it. Every letter.
Really?
Oh
And
yeah,
furthermore,
yeah.
the
You're
letter
having
of
just a
credit.
wonderful time, and we're all here suffering, and hope you're enjoying the food, and we don't have. I mean, it was. She was.
And that letter of credit that you said it was coming hasn't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Send
it was
more money.
wonderful.
You got it so easy there. We have it so hard here. The letters are just.
The children had whooping cough, and she had written him out. Our children are just gagging and throwing up, and it's horrible and horrible. And he wrote back and he said, "Oh, remember this, Emma? We decided a long time ago it sounds worse than it is." Which I thought was pretty darn cold-hearted.
Yeah, the
Brian,
next letter
your
was
turn.
even worse.
I want to honor the honorable. That's what I'm out here for. I want to see to it that we accurately represent our history, and I want to get all the details right. And I think that that's what this thing does, and I appreciate the work that y'all do.
I'll pass that along to the group that does it. It's been a long group. It's been the museum that took care of it, and the Maria Martha Verein and the church that took care of it, and everybody who comes on their own. Yesterday when we were just finishing up this lady comes with this, I don't know if you've had a chance to look at it or not, but there's a thing of roses. They've come every year since 1975. It always says, we remember.
Oh, that's
And he will not tell her who he is. He just sends her a money order. She does it. She brings it up. And they done that just yesterday when we had finished. There was a group going by down here. It was the Mexican window cleaning from the school committee, okay? And they were tromping down the road with their squeegees and their buckets and their things, and they all said, "Good morning, it's nice to see you here." And then they would go down there, and then they all took out their phones and took pictures of us up here at the monument. It was just very nice. Your turn.
I just want to thank all of you who came out to tell us about the monument and about your town and the history here, because a monument is one thing, but when you have people who remember and who will share all the details, it's so different. And that's what I think is so important. That you mentioned that, you know, the monuments need to be honest, and I feel the same way. So I'm of German heritage, and I feel very much people can think and feel and believe what they want, but you have to be honest about what you believe, and you have to be honest about what you've done. And to see the history presented here with, you know, just this is what happened, and for the reasons that people had, this is the way it turned out. That to me is something that helps me going forward to know how I want to be and how I want to behave and how I want to relate to other people. And that's what I think monuments should help us do. Not we need to know about the past, but that should help us do better going forward. So thank you all very much.
Well, thank you very much for coming.
I think
Mike?
y'all do more for history than that professor who couldn't bother to show up.
I know, John Huddleston. I can't think of enough bad things to say about him. Well, I mean, we sat in his office and we were insulted right and left, right, Richard?
Yeah, we really were.
We really were. He wouldn't even come for a Shriner. I wish they'd cut his salary. Michael, would you end us with a prayer, please?
Prayer?
Yes. Well, you weren't here for the Pledge of Allegiance. Not my fault. Well, you were up in the truck.
Oh, did I miss that part?
Yes, Lovey.
I don't think I'm up to that, man.
Chuck Jones, what about you?
I'll do it.
Okay, thank you.
Dear Heavenly Father, Lord, we do thank you for this day you've given us, this time we can come together and just fellowship with one another. Lord, we don't we may not all think the same way, Lord, but we all are in agreement that that this is a great country, Lord, that we have the ability to speak our mind and to remember our history is just so important. Father, I want to thank you for these that have come today to remember what was in the past and to not forget. And Lord, just help us as we go forward to continue to be the human beings that are respectful of one another and respectful of each other's history. And Lord, help these that are going to continue today on their walk. Just keep them safe and just help us as we go our separate ways. And all these things we ask in your Son's name. Amen.
Amen.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for coming in. Enjoyed what you had to say.
Yeah, thanks for coming.